What I spoke about last time, this progressive transformation of Satan into Lucifer. It's not that I want to scare you. On the contrary, I want to give you hope. The fact that Satan, from being the devil, the opposer, the accuser, the divider, the killer, the murderer, has to change himself into a gentle forgiver, without truth, without conversion, of course, but still the nicest of all forgivers, the false unifier above all division, source of life, a life that can save itself. The fact that Satan has to transform himself into this vain Lucifer, it is a sign of hope, at least for me. It's very difficult. In fact, you can no longer distinguish between what Satan does freely and what he is forced to do by Christ. The demon sees his end coming, and he sees that man who believes, man who hopes, man who loves, is actually condemning him and confusing all his plots. And I think that even man who wants evil, man who is sort of part of demonic plots, he acts too quickly because man is scared. Man hates, he's too passionate. So even though people may be inspired by Satan, they act too quickly and they confuse his plans. It will always go wrong, so he always has to come up with something else. And it is in humanity, in mankind, through mankind, that also Satan is condemned and punished. If we are patient, if we do not lose hope, if we do not become angry in the wrong way, we actually help God to prepare his return. By our intercession, souls will be saved. If we intercede, we will save people that actually, according to our human standards, could not be saved, could not be pardoned. We can trust that our prayer is much more effective than we think. It is a sign of hope that Satan must come up with all these plans. And we know from the Bible that, or no, it's my interpretation, sorry. I think I read in the Old Testament that in the end, it's Lucifer who crashes, who becomes a complete disgrace for all humanity to see. I think you see that in us, in human beings, first there is sin of pride, but then there is vanity. Vanity is like an ultimate consequence of sin. That's why vain people are full of themselves, full of vain glory, a kind of spiritual ultimate narcissists. They are blind, they haven't got a clue of what's going on. They've lost contact with reality. And it is both tragic, terrible, and sometimes even amusing how people who are blinded by their own vanity are are ridiculing themselves. So in us, there's first pride, to want to transgress the law, and the ultimate consequence is vanity. Now the thing is, as Satan crashes as Lucifer through human vanity, that's what we see. In Satan, it's the other way around. His first sin is not pride, is not breaking the rules. Vanity actually reveals the original sin of Satan. Satan is not against God because he knows he cannot be against God. It's ridiculous to be against God or say that he does not exist. An angelic spirit sees immediately when he reflects about his own existence that God must exist. To deny God's existence is like burping in public to any angel. It's completely ridiculous. It's so obvious that God exists because they exist. So it's a big joke for Satan when man denies the existence of God. But that's another thing. His laugh will not last. The thing is, in the beginning, Satan was not against God, did not oppose God, but he wanted to include God in his own wisdom. He didn't want to go outside of himself. He didn't want to transgress his own law, his own frontiers, his own limits, in order to beg God to show himself. He wanted to say, God, you're welcome in my wisdom. Whereas God is God, and even the highest angels have to ask to be allowed to enter into this exclusive eternal reality of God's glory. Satan is hyper-inclusive because he wanted to include God into his own wisdom. And that's when he started to make it, that's where it started. The prophet Isaiah says it clearly in no, I don't think it's Ezekiel. It's Ezekiel 8:28, I think. You can look it up. Where it says really formally the first sin of Satan in his Luciferian manifestation, his ultimate but also his original manifestation of evil, Satan is making a deal with God. He wants to trade with God. He wants to be in his exchange of gifts. He wants to be on an equal footing with God. He wants to welcome God into his own wisdom without having to leave himself, without having to acknowledge that his wisdom is, though it's beautiful, it's great, it's still limited. And so the first sin of Satan is to want to welcome and include God into his own wisdom, his own beauty, but not go outside of himself, not show any longing to be part of an exclusive reality, which is heaven, which is the wisdom of God, eternal wisdom. A wisdom that can even create man, uniting matter to spirit. An eternal wisdom that has chosen before the ages that there shall be a mother of God. That's unbearable for Satan. How can God close himself up in a pregnant woman? How can he hide himself in a woman? There's a lot of reasons why the demon hates Our Lady and also why he's very scared of her. Anyway, let's conclude by seeing that though pride is the first sin of man and the ultimate consequence is vanity, with Satan it's the other way around. His original sin is vanity. And then comes anger and opposition, revolt even against God. And when that revolt against God takes shape, becomes manifest and visible in man, then through the forgiveness of God, through the salvation of our Lord Jesus Christ, the pride in man is forgiven, man is redeemed, and ultimately he will reveal the original sin of Satan, which is vanity. And revealing that origin of darkness into the broad daylight, that's the meaning of Lucifer crashing.